Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ayan Isaacs. I'm the head of global growth for the Founder Institute. Super happy that everyone's taking the time to join us today. We have another exciting global webinar for you on how to build a community for your startup by Helen, who's the co-founder of Co.Lab. She's based in Toronto, Canada. So those that know her, you know that she posts some amazing content on LinkedIn all the time, and she's a very big advocate on how companies should be building their respective communities. Um, Let us know in the chat kind of where you're calling in from. We had about, I'd say, 550 people sign up for this. So we're at about 190. So people are okay. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing London, Toronto, Lisbon, Texas, Brooklyn, Montreal, Spain, London again, Berlin, California, Iraq. I'm based here in Dubai, UAE, so Miami, very, very cool. Well, thanks for everyone for joining in. I guess we have good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night for across the board. Yeah, this session will be recorded and sent out within 48 hours um, to everyone. Okay, perfect. We're about 200 people. Let me just kind of go over the agenda and then we'll bring Helen up to the stage. But just at a very high level, Helen's going to come up. She's going to give about 20 to 30 minutes worth of content. After that, we'll break out into questions. Please use the Q&A button. It's right below the messaging button to feed us your questions. We'll do as many as we can. Uh, we'll leave the last 5 to 10 minutes used for open networking. We'll end the session. You'll kind of be ported over to the AirMeet platform where you can see all these tables. Feel free to jump on a table. I'll be on a table. Hopefully, if Helen has time, she'll be on her own table, and then you can ask her some questions. Okay, so let's bring Helen onto the stage. I see Helen over here. Helen, do you want to unmute yourself and show your video? And while she's doing that, I'm going to run a poll. Hey, Helen, how's it going?
Hi everyone. It's
Awesome.
going pretty well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you have about 212 people here just to see you. Awesome. Oh, I forgot to mention. So everyone, you're probably seeing it already. There's an emoji button at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to just express whatever emotion you feel as Helen's giving the presentation. So Helen, we haven't. I think this is the first time this has happened. We haven't even started, and people are already throwing the heart emojis and super excited emojis. So I think you've just knocked it out of the park. Uh, all right, so Helen, while you get your presentation queued up, I'm going to run this poll. Everyone should see a poll on stage, but like, would love to know: have you already built a community for your startup? Yes, no, so thinking about it. So this will give Helen some idea of kind of like where the audience is at. All right, Helen, can you see the results?
I can see the results after I vote, maybe?
Yeah, so I guess
Nope.
maybe. Yeah, so right now we've had about 110 votes in. 65% is saying no, they've not built any of their community. 33% saying they've built it, but it's very, very small, and 3% is saying that yes, they've built it, but they could use improvement. So I hope that is helpful for you as you do this presentation. All right, we are at about 230 people live. I'm gonna be quiet now. Helen, I'll kick it over to you now. Do you want to share your screen and just whenever you're ready?
Perfect. Awesome. Can everyone see my screen? Please say something if you can, because now I can't see the error meet screen.
Yeah, you're good. I'm gonna hop off now.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Well, once again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I have just around 20, 30-ish minutes to talk, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So again, this presentation is going to be all about community building for startups, what, why, how to do it. I'm going to give a lot of examples from my personal experience, some examples, and just inspiration from other companies as well. But my main takeaway, hopefully, for you all is one, to give you guys a sense of where to start when it comes to building a community and important things to keep in mind, and just a jumping off pad for really growing a community led approach to growth for your startup. So let's get started. The start is actually not my intro, that will be slightly later, but just to confirm, everyone is on the same page in terms of what a community means. So the term community is actually quite vague, but really at its core, it's really just a group of people coming together for a common purpose. So an example of a community is something like this, right? Y'all are all tuning in for an FI event because you're interested in building a startup, you're in the beginning stages, you're scaling up a company, but you're all people who are interested in community building. And we're all here for a common purpose of learning how to do just that. So I think it's sort of a meta approach, but that's a call out to you all as well to connect with one another as well as connecting with me and just some of the other speakers that you see on these sessions, because it really is about building up your own startup community as well. But again, community is vague, but in this conversation, hopefully we get to define it a little bit more as well as how to get started. So just a brief overview of why community. I listed down just a few reasons here, but the first one is that it's really your unofficial marketing team, right? It's your group of super fans who are going to be pushing not just you, but also the product or service that you're providing. And they're really going to be developing those viral word of mouth loops, referral loops as well. That might not be something that you actually have resources or funding for, but it's really an organic way of driving referral-based traffic to your company or service. The second thing is that they come with a lot of speedy feedback loops. So if you have a community, that means you have a close-knit group of people who are willing to give you feedback, and honest and actionable feedback at that. I'm sure a lot of us have gone out to do user interviews and customer research and stuff like that, but having a community is the first baseline step to actually being able to capture feedback really quickly. And I'll give examples of how we've done that at Co.Lab as well. Number 3 is customer support. So if you have customers or users that have questions, having a central location for them to really ask their questions and get feedback and answers is great. The best thing about a community as well that's different to just a support channel is that your other customers can actually jump into the conversation and help drive results and answers that way as well. So it's a really good mechanism of passing that community torch, things we'll be talking about later in the presentation as well. And lastly, for companies that are raising, a community is a clear answer that you can give for your startup's unique perspective and unique value that you're delivering, your USP, right? It's something that you can actually mention that you have as a moat. Let's say another product or another company can copy exactly what it is that you do, but how can they copy your community, right? So that's an answer for any of those people out there who are actually raising. We see community as one of the core answers that investors are actually looking for. And lastly, it's one that might not be as common, but it's actually hiring, right? Again, as startups, a lot of us work off of passion. You want your initial group of team members, whether that's your first 5, first 10, first 50, first 100, first 500, to be people that are really dedicated to the problem that you're solving, right? These people are already motivated. They're within the community. You can see how they approach certain things. And so it's actually a really great place to look for your next hire as well. So anyhow, like I mentioned, back to the intro. So hello, everyone. I'm Helen. I'm one of the co-founders here at Co.Lab. And before I get to what Co.Lab is, just a little bit background about me. I actually got my start in earth sciences before I pivoted into tech. So prior to Co.Lab, I was a product manager at Zynga, Microsoft, Github, working on a variety of B2C, B2B apps, services, and even just program management. So have done a bunch of things all around before Co.Lab. Now, what is Co.Lab? Co.Lab, we are an online school focused on helping career transitioners pivot into product. So helping them level up their product mindset through experiential learning programs that are hands-on and go beyond the theory. Our ultimate goal really is to break this cycle for a lot of career pivoters and early in career people. So you often see this, hey, I need experience to get the job, but I need to get the job to get experience. And so what we do is we facilitate these hands-on training programs that are aimed to helping learners get that experience. So it's not just theory, it's not just content, it's not just learning from instructors, but it's really about how they are in the step where they're creating products, right? Where they're building, where they're going through a lot of what each of us have actually done as well in terms of doing customer research, doing market research, and developing products and building with a team. This is an experience that I've actually had, again, going from earth sciences into product at Microsoft. That was a huge jump for me because I didn't have experience. And so this is a personal problem that we then transitioned into ultimately a company for the past 2 years. We also have a relatively small team. And so we have just around 5 full-time employees and anywhere between 10 to 20 subcontractors, mentors, and instructors at any given time. So hopefully that gives a basis of what it is that we do as a company. Now, at the same time, though, it's important to note that we're a community-driven company. So I'm going to take a pause here and ask you to also reflect on your own startup. What kind of startup are you building? What kind of service are you providing? So what are the different types that you can provide? So one, for example, take Reddit, right? Reddit or Alpha or Girlboss. These are examples where community is the product. Reddit wouldn't be Reddit without its content, without its users, without its people, right? So that's a community is the product kind of company. You can also have groups like us. So education groups are a really good example of this. If you have an education aspect in your startup, you might be community driven. So think about taking an MBA or any other course, right? The service that the company provides, that the school provides, is still the curriculum, the lectures, the submissions, the programming and the content. But a huge aspect of it is actually the people that you learn alongside. It's the people that you meet along the way, right? Again, when you're taking an MBA, a lot of what people say is that it's also about the people that you meet in addition to the certificate that you get, right? And so I would label that category, the category that Co.Lab is in, community driven. And then we also have other products such as SaaS tooling or physical products, e-commerce, right? Some of those companies, some of those products, maybe your company or community enabled, community powered, not necessarily community driven. You can still move a lot faster. You can still get so many of the benefits that I mentioned about community by having a community, right? But you're not necessarily community driven. You're not community is your product. So I would love to know, I guess, connect with each other as well in the comments. What kind of company or what kind of startup are you building? Because that is also going to drive the strategy of your overall, community setup. So that's another key important thing. So again, for the purposes of what you all know, Co.Lab is a community-driven kind of company. We're not at our core community powered, we're not all about community, but it is a huge part of what it is that we provide. And so that's how we establish our strategy around community as well. So now when it comes to the numbers, because everyone wants to know sort of the numbers, we've been operational for 2 years, so just 2 years. And so far we have around 12,000 newsletter subscribers, all marketing qualified leads, and further bottom of the funnel, we have around 10,000 company LinkedIn followers, and that doesn't include the 20,000 personal LinkedIn followers that we have, but around 10,000 company ones. And we have a Discord community of around 1,000 members, right? So I actually slashed out 3,000 and I'll mention why, but we have around 1,000. So now the question is, okay, well, these numbers, maybe to you, they seem impressive. Maybe to you, they're like, it's not a million, but I want to actually translate that into return on investment for our company. So again, in the past 2 years, we've graduated around 950 learners so far around the world. So we run monthly cohorts essentially. So we have programs running all of the time. And so in the past 2 years, we've graduated around 950. We have a completion rate of around 90% of our programs. So this is actually really massive. If you're in education, you'll probably understand. The average online learning course, average MOOC on Udemy, it's around 5 to 10% completion. So 90% completion is a really great number that we've really tried to focus on improving. Customer satisfaction score of over 85% across all of our students so far. And we also have a lifetime value per customer of around $3,000. So hopefully that gives you some sense of our numbers in terms of how our community numbers have translated into return on investment for our actual company and the value that we deliver. Now I'm going to go into, again, the specifics of how each of these has mapped to what it is that we've experienced, again, with the goal of inspiring and sort of getting a sense of how other companies do it. So first thing, unofficial marketing team. So in the first year and a half, basically up until now, of our company, again, we're a largely bootstrapped business, right? So we're really just seeing, hey, what are all of the growth mechanisms, all of the viral loops that we can attach onto to help us drive revenue and customer growth. And so our community really, really, really has helped us do that, right? In a low cost kind of way, in a low cost and sustainable kind of way, which is what word of mouth generally is. So here, first 2-ish years, first year and a half, we focus solely on delivering a great product experience, and then leveraging our community to sort of share it with people they know. So what does that look like? It means that every student that we interacted with, that went through one of our programs, we would try to have as close of an interaction point with them as possible, so that after the program, they'd be much more likely to evangelize what it is that they had gone through. Right? Delivering a great experience, staying tight and close-knit with your end customers and with your users, and sort of allowing them to continue that marketing for you without you needing to do everything on your own. So that's one thing that we really, really benefited from. And I would say drove at least 80% of all of our customer growth. Of that 950, over 80% came from our community-driven initiatives. Number 2 is speedy feedback loops. So again, every time we make a change within the program, within our product, our service, we always get to go back to our community first and ask them what it is that they think, right? So for example, we're actually going through a rebranding right now, but instead of just, our team and doing a small select, user study, what we could do is tap into our community, right? If anything, our community is actually really excited to be part of the learning process and the transition progress alongside us, right? Because it makes them feel like they have a voice and that they have a say in where the direction of our company goes. And so again, rebranding exercise, we've been getting a bunch of great feedback from our community members, and that's actually going to shape the direction of where we as a company ultimately brand towards. Number 3 is customer support. So again, we run an education company. What that means is that there's a bunch of student questions before, during, and after the programs, right? And so having a dedicated space for our community has allowed us to actually solve those customer problems in a way that's fast and efficient. So again, we have a Discord community where everyone is in. And what that means is whenever anyone has a question, instead of just relying on our team to answer it, such as, if they email in a question, only our team can answer it. But we're a small team. So the way that we've scaled that is by having a platform, having Discord be that place where people are asking questions. And what that means is not only can our entire team, our mentors, our subcontractors, our supporters answer those questions, other community members and other learners can as well. And so that for us as a startup, as founders, has actually reduced the operational load for us, and has sort of instilled in a community the vibe that, hey, everyone has something to teach, everyone has a solution, right? Which is really all about the vibe that we're trying to aspire to give as well. So that's really helped. For defensibility, it's not something that we're really focused on, mainly because we're a largely bootstrapped company. But again, when we were pursuing a raise, or when we were considering a raise, that is something that a lot of companies actually, or a lot of investors actually brought up, right? They all mentioned that, hey, you have this great startup community. We have a great community of enthusiasts that are trying to pivot into tech and deepen their product skills. And that's a hard community to build. And they're engaged. Wow, that's a massive moat. So again, something that you can leverage if you're in your startup funding phrase. And then lastly, hiring. So one of our early customer success or student success employees was actually someone from our community. They ultimately left to start up a community of their own and get into community management specifically as a job, which is super interesting. But we've had a bunch of volunteers as well coming from our community. So again, great place to look for hiring or just getting helping hands, because already your community is a group of people that are focused on solving the same problems as you, and they believe in you. So it's the initial source that you really should look at if you're looking for any hiring or volunteers. So now let's get into how to set one up. So this section, again, I'm going to try to speed through it because there's a lot of great resources that I'll share as well in terms of where you can read up on how to set up a community. But the first thing that I would think about is really your goals, right? So again, why are you trying to set up a community, right? What kind of company are you building? Are you a community is your product company? Are you a community driven company? Are you a community empowered company? How important is actually a deep community to the success of your product or service or company, right? I would also think about, hey, what amount of resources do you have? Do you have the resources for a dedicated community manager? Is it something that you as a founder are planning on doing? Do you have just a couple of hours a week to do it? Can you find a volunteer? So all of these are things that I would think about as well. And ultimately, what stage is your company in, right? Are you the type of company where you're still trying to find your initial few customers? If so, is community the right way to go? And whatever else. So a lot of things to actually consider when it comes to your goals, because you should never do something without a return on investment. Number two is the format, right? So again, we're all talking on Air Meet. You have Zoom calls. There's a lot of online communities, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, Discord, Slack. But there's actually also in-person communities, right? Think about the last in-person meetup that you went to. That's a really great example of an in-person community. And so thinking about the format as it relates to your company is also really important. Again, thinking about what kind of leadership mechanisms you're looking to set up. So whether you want to have a community manager or whether you want to go bottoms up approach as well in terms of more grassroots community building. Again, I'll touch upon that as well later on, but those are things that you should consider in the formatting. And you should also think about, again, signups. How does someone join your community? Is it going to be more of a gated membership? Are you going to have an application process? Or are you just going to allow anyone to join? So all of those things are things in format as it ties back to your goals as well. Phase 3 is really fostering community. So again, you've now done all of the setup stuff, the important things, the goals, the strategy, but what do you actually do, right? So how do you actually foster a community? Again, lots of approaches to fostering community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that we've tried, that we've done well, and that we've currently do here at Co.Lab. So what is it that we do? So one, we have a dedicated space for our community. So we run our entire community platforming, conversations, management on Discord, right? So our community is for people that have learned with us, that are supporters, that are mentors, and they're in a space where they can communicate with each other, and that's Discord. I personally really like Discord over Slack, mainly because there's a lot more functionality and a lot more ways where learners can actually start communities. So that's why I like it. But again, Slack works. Again, in-person works as well. Circle, a bunch of community platforms. We also do weekly threads. So weekly conversations where we're prompting for engagement and also conversations between the rest of the community. Again, we run a community of folks that are trying to pivot or level up their product skills. So we might share a resource and ask what people think about it. We might give a case study and give some examples and see if anyone else has any feedback. We might also just ask about how the job search is going and try to engage with one another to help each other, give each other support. So those are examples of weekly threads that we do. We've also done in-person meetups, actually. So in Toronto, we've run a few meetups. In Seattle, we've run a few meetups, and students have also run their own meetups. So that's another example of a community building initiative that sort of steps beyond the computer, right? And gives everyone a space where they can connect and interact with each other in person. We also do member features. So we have a newsletter. It goes out to around 12,000 community members. And so every month we'll shout out a community member. And so this is a good way for community members to feel like, okay, well, I'm actually part of something. I'm seen. I'm not just a number. And it's also a good mechanism for us to get feedback and updates on our community members' lives, right? And so that sort of has a two-pronged approach that's really helpful. Again, we do community events online. So these are dedicated events similar to this one that are specific for our community. And then we even have a community book club. So before I touch on the community book club, I wanted to go back to growing, which is phase 4 of how to set up a community. Again, I would say that most of your time should be on phase 1, 2, and 3. And ultimately giving value to the community members that you're in. But obviously, as founders, as startup people, we need to think about the future, right? We need to think about the North Star and where we're headed to. And so growing is a key aspect of setting up your community. The way that I would approach growing is not growing for numbers' sake, right? It's really about how do you provide value to the people that are in your community, and how do you grow sustainably in a way where people are engaged? Because I'm sure we've all been in those community groups and those Slack channels where you message something and nobody gives you a response, right? Do you consider that a community, or do you consider that more of just a meeting ground or more of a list? I would argue that community, again, you want passionate folks, you want community leaders and people that are going to drive the mission alongside your startup. So for us, this community book club was one of the first ways that we noticed that passing the community torch happening, right? Because the way to think about community when you first start it is a series of nodes. You're at the top as a community manager or a startup founder or a member of the team. And then you have all of these nodes that come out from you, right? Like those are the individual members of your community, but you can't scale that way. The only way to scale is by empowering the other members of your community to start becoming nodes of their own, right? To start espousing the same mission, the same passion, the same focus and for what it is that you're doing, and starting communities, again, of their own in some way, shape, or form, right? And so with our community book club, that was a great example where that wasn't something that, we were like, oh yeah, we need a book club. This was an example where a community member felt empowered by what it is that we did, felt like they were surrounded by a group of similarly passionate-minded people. And they were like, oh, here's what we need. I would love to read with other people, right? I would love to read with other people that are in a similar life stage than me. So I'm going to start this. And it's still ongoing, and it's been over a year, right? Same thing with our in-person meetups. My co-founder Shifumi and I, we can't be everywhere all at once, right? And so a lot of these initiatives are initiatives that are held by our team, not our team members, but our community members. And that has been a great way for us to actually scale, because that's how you pass the community building torch from you holding it yourself into the hands of your community members and allowing them to further the growth for you. So I wanted to give a few examples now of great communities. Again, the goal of giving these examples, along with the rest of what I've shared, is to give clear, actionable things, right? This is a 30-minute presentation. You are not going to learn everything you need about community building in one conversation, but hopefully this serves as the launch pad for you to find inspiration points from other companies, from Co.Lab, from one another, in growing your community and fostering a great one. So Notion is an example of one of those companies. So Notion, again, not an education company, a SaaS tool, a platform, right? People use it, but they've done a great job when it relates to their community building efforts. One thing I want to call out as well, though, is that Notion didn't grow as an early stage startup from their community generating efforts, right? I would say that for a lot of companies, community building, community-led growth is more of a longer term initiative, similar with SEO, right? You still have to build a great product for your community to get around it, or you have to have a clear vision, you have to have a clear goal, right? That's very different than possibly getting your initial few customers. So that's just a heads up and something to consider as well. But Notion is a great example of a grassroots community. So like I mentioned, Co.Lab is an example where we have one dedicated space, we have one Discord, all of our learners, our community members come there to have conversations. But Notion is a great example where they're taking the bottoms up approach, right? Again, you can talk about Notion wherever you want to talk about Notion. You can talk about it on Clubhouse, on Discord, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on Twitter, on websites. So all of these are community-driven areas where you can actually converse about a common passion, which is Notion, right? Which is about, organizing your thoughts, displaying things in a contextual, artistic way that's easy to clarify and understand. Right? So that's one example of what it is that they've done well in terms of passing the torch to their community members. Because imagine if Notion had a team, right? Which they do, but imagine if they needed an individual for every single source of conversation. That's a large amount of resources to dedicate. But what they've done is they've given a lot of information, a lot of support and empowerment to each of their community members. And so I also wanted to call out the Notion Campus Leader initiative. So this is just one example of an initiative that they do. You should totally Google the notion.so/community resource page they have, because they have a bunch of programs like this. Notion Campus Leader is for university students, right? And they also have influencer programs. They have all of these other programs with incentives and with ways to make people feel like they're connected. And so this is an example of community building that Notion has done that I take a lot of inspo in as well. But now another example that's sort of interesting is Instant Pot. Right? So again, we're in a digital first world. We think that all communities need to be around SaaS platforms, community platforms, Reddit, etc., which is also not actually the case. So Instant Pot is another really interesting example. So I have an Instant Pot. I don't know if y'all have an Instant Pot, but I'm also in this community, right, where people share memes, tips, advice, recipes, and stuff like that. And one thing, again, to note about Instant Pot is that they didn't start off with having a community-led approach. So in 2008, when Instant Pot launched, they actually sold 500 units in their first year by sending a free 200 units to celebrity chefs, which was the initial integrator or instigator of their community, right? So they did that. And so community wasn't necessarily their first, oh, here's how I got my first 500 customers. But it is what got them all of their success that came after, right? Because they were able to get feedback. Again, going back to a benefit of community is that feedback mechanism, right? And so even highly recommend just watching this short 1-minute clip on CNBC's Make It, where he talks about, the Instant Pot CEO talks about how getting customer feedback through this Facebook group, through their Amazon reviews, was one of the core things that led them to developing a better product, which then led them to expanding and gaining a lot more success. So here's just another example where, hey, even if you're running an e-commerce startup, right, you're selling physical products, there's all of these mechanisms that we can think about community building that can lead you to further startup growth. So just to, end off a little bit on some of the lessons that I've learned about community building, though, is really it's about quality over quantity. So when we first started, again, we're still relatively early on in our startup career. So I would also love to see what it is that some of you have learned in terms of building your community, and any tips that you have to share with the rest of the community, including myself. But really, it's about quality over quantity, right? It's not about the numbers. It's not about having 1 million subscribers or anything like that. And so one of the things that we realized early on is that, hey, at some point we had 3,000 community members. But we pruned that to 1,000 pretty recently. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to avoid that, inactive community feel, right? Because no one likes it when they join a Discord or when they join a Slack and there's no one commenting. And it just makes you feel like, well, what's the point of me being here? It takes away all of that passion you had initially. And that excitement that you have when you're onboarding onto a new community, right? Another important topic when you're onboarding. But it takes away that excitement because you need that initial, wow, okay, I'm tied in, I'm plugged in, I'm a core member. They value my voice. I have something to learn and I have something to teach and something to say. Right. So we actually pruned our community members to really make it more active and more dedicated and more focused. And that's been better, not only for our community members, but it's also been better for our own team. Because again, managing communities is work, right? And so we really, really just needed to focus. And to do that, we pruned our community list. The second thing is, again, having focus. So we're still 2 years in, close to 1,000 students graduated so far, but we're still an early stage business, right? And so another learning here was having focus. I showed all 6 different things of what we've tried to grow our community and to engage our community, but we've really tried to focus on just a core few, right? Because to do something well, you need to have focus on doing it well. And we're all resource constrained in some sort of way. And so here I would say my learning or our learning was that, hey, building a great community requires focus, requires delivering impact at depth. And to do that, we can't do it all, right? And so let's determine a few that we want to do. Let's measure that. Let's understand the metrics that we're trying to change with those initiatives. And let's make sure that it's working. And then the last thing is that it's not about you, right? It's not about us. It's not about us on this community learning call. right? It's about our community members, and it's about the value that we're delivering to them, and it's about how they can grow with us and with one another. And so that was another thing that we had to learn. We initially first viewed this list of 3,000 Discord members as, wow, okay, this is a customer list. But that's actually not true, right? Ultimately, you're not using this list as, oh, we need this, so we're going to ping them for that, and they love us, so they're going to do it. No, it's about constantly engaging them. It's about providing them with value, with tips, with advice, making them feel like they're valued. Again, that is really going to drive long-term community effectiveness and cohesiveness for you as a startup. And so those are the 3 lessons that we have learned as well. And so with that, I just wanted to wrap up because, we're already at like the 25, 30-minute mark. Always open for any questions. I love anything community building wise, and I have so many other examples that I wanted to list but couldn't. But ultimately, just wanted to say, have fun. The community building experience is meant to be a fun one because you're not just building it for them. Again, it's not just about them. It's actually also about you, right? It's about being an integrated component of your community, and it's about showcasing that passion with one another and making them feel like you're one of them. And that's really the most effective way to grow. So again, have fun, and definitely reach out to me or anyone else if you have any questions. So with that wraps up my community presentation.
Awesome,
Hopefully
thanks.
that was
Yeah, Helen, that was great. I was taking a lot of notes, and you're getting a ton of positive acknowledgments from the audience. I think they were very, very helpful. Yeah, a lot to digest. Thank you so much for taking the time for putting that together. I think community is one of those things that a lot of companies and startup founders try to figure out, but they don't end up solving it, or they kind of lose their motivation. I think your presentation is really great for kind of inspiring people to actually rethink community in a different manner. I'm definitely going to be taking a lot of this stuff away from it. All right, we're going to dive deep into the questions. I don't know, you got like a ridiculous amount of questions in here, so I don't know how many of these we can kind of go through. Let's try to do 5 to 10 till the top of the hour. Leave some time for networking. All right, I'm just going to bring these up on stage. Folks, please feed your question to the Q&A part. Look at the existing questions, upvote it because I'm going to go through the most popular ones. All right, so Hale from London is asking, I feel like this is a philosophical question, but does community come first or product? All these product managers, they would love this question, but curious to know your thought.
So I sort of would think about where you are in your startup building phase. So for example, if you've yet to begin, building a community is really a great source of understanding where your first initial customers are coming from, right? And so before you build anything, and also keep in mind that I was previously a product manager, so I think about everything when it comes to a product mindset in terms of developing product. So again, before you build anything, you need to know that your customers want it, right? So it's not about building what you want, it's about building what customers want. And so in that case, having a community, having that customer list, having that initial list of even 10 people is a great way to understand that, okay, what I'm building actually makes sense, right? So in this case, I would say it's sort of like a chicken and egg, right? Whereas if you're further in your phase, so let's say you already have a product, right? Again, part of product building, part of startup building is constant iteration. So one thing that you're always going to want to understand is, okay, well, I've built this thing. Is it effective? And is it moving the metrics that I want it to move? How do you know that? You know that by engaging your users and your customers. And so again, who are your customers and your users? Part of that could be your community members. So it's sort of hard to answer necessarily, but that's sort of how I would approach it. The other thing that's interesting to note here, and I highly recommend people look into, is community-led growth versus product-led growth, right? Again, community-led growth is one where, hey, you leverage a lot of word of mouth, the things that I've explained. Product-led growth is when, hey, your product is so good and your services are so great that it continues to generate the same thing. So in reality, they actually quite tie into one another, right? You have products and services and you have customers for them. And it's just a matter of where exactly you feel like your strengths are and what it is that you want to do. And to wrap up this answer, the third thing I would also note is understanding your responsibilities and your strengths as a founder or as a team, right? If you feel like you have team members that are really all about community building and that's where you're passionate about, perhaps starting with community and being able to discuss some of that and sort of like getting these customer insights is the way to go. Whereas if you have a really technical minded team where they're building fast and they're down to experiment and they're down to pivot and switch, maybe building product should be the thing that you're actually starting with. So a bunch of things that can determine your strategy. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
I think that was a great response. Very, very insightful. I would love to add to it, but just trying to kind of get through these questions, and then maybe towards the end, if we have time, I'll kind of give our 2 cents at F5, because I feel like F5 we're in a similar boat. We're trying to be more community driven, and hence the reason for these type of events and stuff. Let's bring up the next question from BJ from Ann Arbor. He's asking, how do you incentivize people to join your community without spending a ridiculous amount of money? Or well, should you be spending like actual money on it as well? So what are your thoughts on that?
So just for reference, our community, we have spent, well, I don't want to say $0 because we have given out a few swag boxes to great community members, but generally it has been a $0 initiative. The only thing that we've mainly been spending on is employee time, right? Like team member time to facilitating some of these conversations or making sure that the community is filled with high engagement, impactful content. So that's just a reference from us. Now, I would say that the way to do it is really to think about the personal reasons why someone would join your community, right? At the end of the day, we develop startups to solve a problem, but those problems might be surface level because when you dig deeper into every single problem, there's a personal response or a personal reason for each of them, right? So I find that the best way to incentivize people is tapping into that personal desire. So as an example for us, we run an online training program. We do that by running really hands-on, collaborative, live learning boot camps, right? So that's what we do. Why do customers come to us? They come to us because they don't know product management and they want to learn, or they want to build an MVP and they don't know how, right? Or they find online courses right now too theoretical. But that's just the surface level of what it is that they want to do, right? If you dig a little bit deeper, what they actually want is, okay, well, they feel the sense of imposter syndrome, right? They're switching careers. They've never had that experience before. They want to find a place where they feel like they belong and that they have the tools to success already within them. They want to feel like their perspectives are valid and that they have what it takes, right? And so when you get to that third level, it becomes really easy to speak to someone's personal desires. It becomes easy to say, hey, we're a community not just for career switchers looking to break into tech. We're a community for people that really want to showcase to others that they can achieve their dreams, right? They want to make a change in their families' lives, and they want to support other people in doing that. So when you actually dig into the emotional problem that they're solving, it becomes a lot easier to say, hey, join our community if you believe in that mission. You're going through it yourself, and eventually you're going to be on the other side. So come now and help us help other people do the same thing, right? We all want to make impact in our lives. Some of us might not have a direct path to knowing how, right? Thinking about the Instant Pot example, their community members, I make a few memes, etc., but that's their way of storytelling, right? That's their way of showing what it is that they've learned and helping others along the way. And so some of these are examples of how you can also not spend a bunch of money, but still bring in true fans and people that are willing to help one another by digging deeper.
Yeah, these are great responses. I'm so glad this is being recorded because I think for a lot of people, they need to kind of go back and revisit your answers. But I think, yeah, you have so much knowledge in this space. It's great. Let's do a few more just to, and then maybe I'll try to burn through some of these as lightning rounds. But Gaurav is from Mumbai is asking, how do you build a community for B2B products? And we've had 2-3 questions in the chat here about, hey, I'm medical devices. I'm doing something that's a little bit more enterprisey. Like, what would your thoughts be on this, or suggestions, I would say?
So the first thing that I would say is actually, again, we have a bunch of B2B founders in this very conversation. So if you have an answer, definitely toss it in the chat as well. Because again, a core aspect of building community is realizing that it's not just the speaker having the answers, it's that us as a community, we're all here for one thing. We're passionate about building community. So let's help one another build that community. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say is that I've noticed a lot of B2B companies building community initially starting with, again, their customers, right? So if you're in enterprise sales, or like if you're doing enterprise sales, you have enterprise companies already. If they're open to it, because again, there's privacy concerns when it comes to B2B as well. So that's one thing to note. If they're open to it, you can get them together to do information sharing conversations, right? So again, helping connect your customers so that they can help one another and become more embedded in your product's ecosystem. The other thing I would say is you can go one level beyond that, right? You don't need to be I'm a medical device company and I do this specific thing and I've built this community around doing this specific thing for my company, right? You can go one step above of saying, okay, well, we're a medical devices company, but here's our goal, right? Our goal is to reduce pollutants in the air for people at hospitals. I'm just making something up, right? But there's going to be a lot of companies and ultimately a lot of people and a lot of organizations that are going to be interested in that. They don't particularly need to use your product to do that, right? But now you're tapping again into a personal, more emotional desire for what it is that they're trying to do, right? And again, this gives you, as the community runner, it doesn't mean that everyone is going to use your company or go through your company or be a customer, but it establishes you as a brand that they trust, right? It gives you brand authority. And it also gives you access to this community of people that, again, might not be your customers right now, but maybe they can eventually be your customers. And all of that opens up doors as well to what it is that you can ultimately do for your startup. So I would probably think about it as like two different tiers.
Awesome, thanks. Once again, great response. So the next three questions, let's try to keep them lightning round or just as a little bit briefer because I think they're really important. And then we can kind of break out for networking because I don't think we will have full time. All right, let's go. What do you do about the haters in your community, Helen? All the people that are saying they're passing the negative. Do you just ban them and move on? Do you try to do a retro and figure out what's going on? What are your thoughts?
So in this case, I would say that a community, again, it should have your core fans. That doesn't mean your fans won't have feedback, right? In this case, again, depending on the size of your company and also where this community is held, one, having an approach where you can hop on a call with them, right? Like if they're giving you feedback, again, any feedback is a gift. You want people to give you feedback. And if they're bad, that's an opportunity for you to grow and learn, just like the Instant Pot example. But I would also think about whether, again, if they're willing to really like drag you through the mud, whether that's a community, right? Because that doesn't really sound like true fans. Maybe that's just a space where they're connecting and conversing. And maybe that should be an indicator to you that, hey, you need another place where you can actually filter through some of this and bring in the people that are there to help you, right? That are intertwined with the mission. So I would think about some stuff like that. I also know some groups have just deleted those comments. I would prefer not to do that, mainly because like transparency, which is why I highly recommend just responding to them anyway and being like, hey, I want to learn, right? Because again, that's a good practice for other future prospective members of your community to acknowledge that, hey, this organization, I can trust them. They're willing to hear feedback and they're willing to build what it is that we need them to build.
Yeah, great response. All right, Rena from Toronto is asking, how do you prune your community members? This is based on engagement and actually without actually offending them. Do you just boot them off the platform if they're inactive up for 3 months, or what's your suggestion there?
Yeah, so for anyone using Discord, there's actually a prune function. So it actually tells you if they've engaged, opened, read anything within the last X days. And so usually if they haven't responded or seen anything in 30 days, we will prune them. Now, are they offended? Perhaps, but you know what? They can always email us to join. And so far, nobody has emailed us, right? Actually, 2 or 3 people probably have to be let back into the community, which we've let them, right? With a caveat that, hey, we're trying to keep this community really active, really engaging. And so if you're there, we will expect you to actually participate. So that is what we have done. Other things that you can do that, let's say you're pruning your community newsletter, right? This is as easy as running like a re-engagement campaign, sending them something like, again, you can tell who has opened, who has read, and all of those other details. It's also important to prune your newsletter mainly because it affects your deliverability over time. So doing that, we send a re-engagement campaign. Hey, you haven't responded in so-and-so. We noticed that you haven't been interested, and doing something like that. Overall, though, I would say that people who haven't been engaging generally don't care. And so I would not let that be a reason for not keeping the core community members, people that are actually giving value, and just prioritizing them instead.
I love it. That's a great response. All right, last but not least, this is a very good question by Casper. How do you measure impact of your community on your business? Uh, Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the first thing is that, again, understanding where community fits into your strategy. Because I'm sure as startup owners, founders, operators, etc., we can spend so much time on just defining the KPIs and metrics, right? And that's time that's spent away from your startup. So again, depending on which stage you're in, that's an important thing to actually understand. Number two, so if you're running a community on Discord like we are, there's not a lot of really great built-in tools that help you measure engagement, right? But if you're using another tool like a Circle, or there's focused community management platforms that will give you high-level details that you need. So things like number of conversations started, right? Daily active users, who's logging on, who's connecting with one another. Those are platforms. There are some platforms where those features are actually built in, and I would highly recommend tapping into that if you've decided that community-led growth is a core part of your strategy. For us, again, we've noticed that in the early stages, understanding where customers were coming from through some of our lead forms, that was the easiest way to measure. Nowadays, I'll be honest, it becomes really hard to measure return on investment, right? Because we're having students meet up in person and connect with each other at conferences that we don't know of until we see a LinkedIn post. And it's not worth our time as an organization to go out and message everyone. It was like, oh, have you done this week? Right. And so that's just a caveat that for us, it's faster for us to actually just, hey, every week we've done this. Here's been the number of comments. Here's the people that we're noticing have been engaging. Let's make sure that we call them out on our newsletter and showcase them and connect them with each other. And for return on investment, let's just continue to see how well is our referral program working, right? Before it was over 85%. Now a great source of our learners are coming from other channels, right? So that's an example of, you could say that, well, the community initiative isn't actually working. You could also say that, oh, we found other ways of growing, right? And so it really is a hard question to answer, but that's sort of how we've done it.
No, that's great. Helen, thank you so much. You've been an awesome instructor and host for today's webinar. You've answered those questions amazingly. We hit about 459 people at one point. Right now, we still have 268 people. So I'm sure a lot of folks, and plus another few hundred will get this recording. So, thank you so much for taking the time. As you can see at the bottom, you're getting a lot of different emojis, positive reinforcement. Just before we wrap up here and open up for networking, any final thoughts for the audience on just parting wisdom?
Parting wisdom wise, I feel like I've said a lot, but again, ultimately have fun in delivering value to your audience or your community. And in return, they will give you so much as well, right? It really is a reciprocal relationship that you're building. But just remember that it is not up to you to be the node, right? It's about passing on that baton and knowing that the mission that you instill goes far beyond whatever it is that we're doing in this very moment. So outside of that, though, again, I'll be sharing a bunch of resources. Well, one, I know this deck is going to go out to you guys, but in the next few days, I think I'll also make a lot of posts on my LinkedIn about other resources and just lessons that I've learned, because this has been a good experience for me as well to reinforce some of what I've experienced. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and feel free to reach out there if you have any other questions, and also to reach out with one another as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in and sharing time with me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I do encourage everyone, do follow Helen. She does post some awesome stuff from videos to memes. And I remember the one you did on the Apple Vision one. That was pretty cool. Okay, we'll wrap up here, folks. We'll end the session. You'll kind of see a bunch of tables. Feel free to jump onto the table and talk to each other. Helen, thank you so much. And then everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, or night.